Prophet Muhammad SAW visions. The night was still. The air over the mountains of Arabia carried a quiet unlike any other, deep, reflective, almost waiting. Inside a small cave on Mount Hira, a man sat alone, seeking answers. His name was Muhammad SAW, known among his people for his honesty, his integrity, and his thoughtful heart. Yet something weighed on him. The world around him felt lost, full of injustice, confusion, and moral darkness. He often retreated to this cave to reflect, to disconnect from the noise, and to search for truth. But on this particular night, everything was about to change. Suddenly, without warning, the silence broke. A powerful presence filled the cave. It wasn't something seen before, nor something easily understood. The angel Gabriel appeared, bringing with him a command that would echo through history. Read. Muhammad SAW, startled and overwhelmed, replied honestly, "I am not one who can read." Again, the command came firm, undeniable. Read. And one's response. The moment was intense, almost beyond human comprehension. Then, for the third time, the command came, and with it, the first words of revelation. Read, in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen taught, man that which he knew not. These words weren't just sentences. They were the beginning of something monumental. They marked the first verses of what would become the Holy Quran. In that instant, Muhammad SAW was no longer just a man in reflection. He had been chosen as a messenger, shaken, deeply moved, and carrying the weight of what had just happened. He rushed home. His heart was racing. His mind was overwhelmed. Cover me, he said to his wife, Khadija Ra, seeking comfort and reassurance. And she gave it with calm strength and unwavering belief. She reminded him of who he was: truthful, kind, trustworthy. She reassured him that Allah would never abandon someone like him. That night in the cave was not just a moment, it was a turning point for humanity. A message had begun, a mission had been set, and from that quiet mountain cave, a light was ignited that would spread across the world. It all started with a single word: read. Prophet Muhammad SAW and Cave Hira. Picture this: a quiet mountain just outside Makkah, the city asleep, the stars stretching endlessly across the sky, and high above it all, far from the noise, far from the chaos, there's a small cave, the Cave of Hira. Inside that cave sits a man, not a king, not a warrior, just a man searching for truth. His name, Muhammad SAW. Now, here's the thing. Makkah at that time wasn't exactly a place of peace and justice. Society was filled with inequality, idol worship, and moral confusion. And Muhammad SAW, he felt it deeply. He couldn't ignore it. So, instead of getting lost in it, he stepped away from it. Again and again, he would climb that mountain alone. Think about that climb for a second. No roads, no lights, just rocks, steep paths, and silence. It wasn't easy, but he kept going. Why? Because sometimes, to find clarity, you need distance from the noise. In that cave, he would sit for hours, sometimes days, reflecting, thinking, observing. He wasn't just passing time, he was asking the big questions. Why are we here? What is truth? Is there something greater beyond all of this? And then on one unforgettable night, everything changed. That same Kavi, that silence, suddenly filled with something powerful, something beyond human understanding. The angel Gabriel appeared, and with him came a message that would change the course of history forever. But here's what makes this moment so powerful. It didn't happen in a palace. It didn't happen in front of crowds. It happened in solitude, in stillness, in Yakavi. Because sometimes the biggest transformations don't come from the outside world. They come from moments when you're alone, thinking, searching, and being real with yourself. The Cave of Hira wasn't just a location. It became a symbol of reflection, a symbol of seeking truth, a symbol that before you can change the world, you have to understand it and understand yourself. So next time life feels noisy, overwhelming, or confusing, remember that cave. Step back, reflect, think, because who knows? Your moment of clarity might be waiting in the story of Prophet Muhammad saw and the woman who threw garbage. A lesson in patience and kindness. Picture this, a narrow street in Makkah. People walking by, life moving as usual. And every single day, as Prophet Muhammad saw passed through that street, something unpleasant happened. From above, a woman would throw garbage on him. Yes, garbage. Not once, not twice, but regularly. Now, think about that for a second. Most probably, they'd react. They'd argue. Maybe even retaliate. But not the Prophet saw. He didn't shout. He didn't insult. He didn't seek revenge. He simply carried on with patience, dignity, and calm, day after day. No reaction, no anger, just quiet strength. But then one day something changed. As he walked down that same street, nothing happened. No garbage, no disturbance, silence. And instead of feeling relieved or ignoring it, the Prophet saw noticed something deeper. Why didn't she throw anything today? He didn't assume the best for himself. He became concerned for her. So what did he do? He went to her house, knocked on her door, and when it opened, he didn't come with anger. He came with care. He asked about her well-being because she was sick. Let that sink in. The same person who had treated him badly was now being cared for by him. Grud, no bursts, just kindness. And that moment, it changed everything. The woman, shocked by his character, saw something she had never seen before: true compassion, a level of patience and mercy that couldn't be ignored. Some narrations mention that this interaction deeply moved her, and she began to see the truth in his message. This story isn't just about patience. It's about responding to negativity with positivity. It's about rising above ego. It's about showing kindness even when it's not deserved, because anyone can be kind to those who are good to them. But it takes real strength to be kind to those who hurt you. So the next time someone treats you unfairly, when you're tempted to respond with anger, remember this story, because sometimes your reaction isn't just a response. It's a message, and the strongest message you can send is kindness. The story of Prophet Muhammad saw and the honor of a black companion breaking barriers of race and status. Picture this, a society where your worth is judged by your tribe, your wealth, your status. If you were powerful, you were respected. If you were poor or a slave, you were ignored. That was the reality of Arabia before Islam. But then came a message that flipped everything. A message that said every human being has value. And one of the most powerful examples of this change, a black companion, once a slave who rose to a place of honor. His name was Bilal Ra. Bilal wasn't from a powerful tribe. He didn't have wealth. In fact, he was enslaved and faced severe persecution for accepting Islam. Under the burning desert sun, he was tortured for one reason: his belief. Yet through it all, he kept repeating one word: Ahad, Ahad, one, unshakable faith. And when he was freed, something extraordinary happened. Prophet Muhammad honored him in a society obsessed with status. The Prophet chose Bilal Ra to be the first muezzin, the one who would call the adhan. Think about that. The voice that would echo through Medina, calling people to prayer, was the voice of a man society once looked down on, not because of status, not because of lineage, but because of faith. And it didn't stop there. Years later, after the conquest of Makkah, the Prophet asked Bilal Ra to climb on top of the Kaaba, the most sacred place, and call the adhan. For many, this was shocking. a former slave, Blaki Mung, standing at the highest point of honor. But that was the message, loud and clear. In Islam, your worth isn't based on color, or background, or wealth. It's based on your character and your connection with Allah. The Prophet didn't just preach equality, he demonstrated it. He broke barriers. He challenged norms. He elevated those who were once pushed down. And here's the lesson. True honor doesn't come from what people think of you. It comes from who you are in the sight of Allah. So the next time you see differences, race, background, status, remember Bilal Ra, because in a world that often divides, this story reminds us that true greatness has no color. The story of Prophet Muhammad and Bilal's freedom from chains to honor. Picture this, the scorching desert sun, burning sand beneath, and a man lying on the ground, weighed down by a massive stone. That man was Bilal Ra, a slave, powerless in the eyes of society, but powerful in something far greater faith. His master tortured him relentlessly. Why? Because Bilal Ra believed in one God, because he refused to deny the truth. Again and again, under unbearable heat, he was forced to abandon his belief. And what did he say? Ahad, Ahad, one. No fear, no compromise, just unwavering. Now, imagine witnessing that, seeing someone suffer not for crime, not for rebellion, but for belief. This is where the story takes a powerful turn. Abu Bakr, the closest companion of Prophet Muhammad, saw what was happening. He couldn't ignore it. He couldn't walk away. So he made a bold move. He approached Bilal's master and offered to buy his freedom. It wasn't easy. It wasn't cheap. But Abu Bakr paid the price without hesitation. And just like that, Bilal dos Adventícios was free. Let that moment sink in. From chains to freedom. From oppression to dignity. But here's what makes this story even more powerful. This wasn't just about freeing a man physically. It was about restoring his honor. Under the guidance of Prophet Muhammad, Bilal Ra didn't just become another freed slave. He became a respected member of the Muslim community, a man of status, a man of voice, a man of honor. In fact, he would go on to become the first Mu'min, the one chosen to call believers to prayer. Think about that transformation. The same voice that once cried out under torture, now echoed across the city, calling people to worship. That's not just freedom, that's elevation. This story teaches something deep. True leadership isn't just about words, it's about action. It's about standing up for others, even when it costs you. It's about recognizing value where the world refuses to see it, and it also reminds us, your past doesn't define your future. Your struggles don't limit your worth. So the next time you feel weighed down, when life feels unfair, when you question your value, remember Bilal Ra, because sometimes the very struggle that tries to break you is the one that elevates you the highest. The story of Prophet Muhammad and the man who urinated in the mosque, a masterclass in wisdom and compassion. Picture this, a peaceful gathering inside the mosque, people sitting calmly, learning, reflecting, connecting, and then out of nowhere something shocking happens. A man, unfamiliar with the environment, stands up, walks to a corner, and starts urinating inside the mosque. Yes, right there. The companions are stunned. Instant reaction, anger. They jump up, ready to stop him immediately. Voices raise. The situation is about to escalate fast, but then the Prophet Muhammad steps in. Let him finish. Wait, what? Instead of reacting with anger, he chooses calm. Instead of immediate correction, he chooses patience. The companions pause, confused, but they listen. The man finishes. The moment settles, and now comes the part that changes everything. The Prophet doesn't yell. He doesn't humiliate. He doesn't punish. Instead, he gently calls the man and speaks to him with kindness. He explains that the mosque is a place of cleanliness, prayer, and remembrance of Allah. It's not meant for things like this. Simple, clear, respectful, no embarrassment, no harshness. And then he instructs the companions to clean the area with water. Problem solved. But here's what's powerful. The man wasn't from Medina. He didn't know the etiquettes. This wasn't rebellion, it was ignorance. And the Prophet understood the difference. He didn't just correct the action, he preserved the person's dignity. That's leadership. That's emotional intelligence. That's wisdom in action. Because anyone can react in anger when something goes wrong. But it takes real strength to pause, to understand, and to respond in a way that teaches without hurting. And imagine how that man must have felt. Instead of leaving embarrassed or defensive, he left understanding, respected, and likely transformed. This story teaches us something incredibly relevant. Not everyone who makes a mistake is your enemy. Sometimes people just don't know better, and how you respond in those moments, it matters. So, the next time you see someone mess up, when your first instinct is to react, pause, think, and remember this moment, because sometimes the best way to correct a mistake isn't with anger, it's with kindness that leaves a lasting impact. The story of Prophet Muhammad and the hungry companions, when a little became more than enough. Picture this, a small group of companions sitting together, hunger written across their faces. Days had passed with little to eat. The situation was real. The struggle was real. This wasn't comfort. This wasn't ease. This was... Among them was Abu Huraira, who later described moments where hunger would press so hard that it felt unbearable. Some companions would tie stones to their stomachs just to ease the pain. Now, imagine that level of hunger, and in the middle of it all Prophet Muhammad saw, not separated from their struggle, but part of it. He felt what they felt. He experienced what they experienced. One day, seeing the condition of his companions, the Prophet invited them for food. But here's the catch, the food was very little. Just a small amount of milk? Now, think about it logically. A few peoples? Maybe. But a group of hungry companions. It didn't seem enough. At all. But the Prophet did something unexpected. He didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate. Trusted. He asked for the bowl to be brought and began serving, one by one. Each person drank, then another. The cup kept going, and somehow it didn't run out. Let that sink in. What looked limited became sufficient. What seemed small became enough for everyone. Even Abu Huraira drank until he was full, and finally the Prophet himself drank last. This wasn't just about food, it was about barakah, blessing, a reminder that when something is given with sincerity, shared with others, and connected to trust in Allah, its impact multiplies. This story teaches something powerful. Scarcity doesn't always mean lack. Sometimes it's an opportunity to witness blessing. It also shows the character of the Prophet He didn't eat first, he made sure everyone else was satisfied before himself. That's leadership. Scotty, that's selflessness. So the next time you feel like what you have isn't enough, when resources seem limited, when you're worried about how will this work, remember this moment, because sometimes it's not about how much you have, it's about the barakah within it. And with that, even the smallest amount can become more than enough. The story of Prophet Muhammad and the tree that cried, a moment that touched even nature. Picture this, a simple mosque in Medina. No luxury, no grand design, just a place filled with sincerity. And inside, Prophet Muhammad is delivering a sermon. But here's something interesting. Before there was a proper pulpit, the Prophet would lean against a tree trunk while speaking. It stood there quietly, supporting him, part of those powerful moments of guidance. Day after day, that tree trunk became more than just wood, it became part of the experience. Now, fast forward. The companions decided to build a proper minbar, pulpit, so the prophet saw, could be seen and heard more easily. Maji says it was practical. It was helpful. So the next time he gave the sermon, he stood on the new pulpit instead. Everything seemed normal until it wasn't. Suddenly, a sound filled there. A strange sound. Human, not ordinary. It was coming from the tree trunk. It began to cry. Yes, cry. A deep, emotional sound, like something grieving, like something feeling loss. The companions were shocked. They looked around, trying to understand what was happening. But the prophet knew. He stepped down from the pulpit, walked toward the tree, and placed his hand on it. And just like that, the crying stopped. Calm, peace, as if it had been comforted. Let that moment sink in. A piece of wood, something we consider lifeless, felt the absence of the prophet's soul. Unless it responded with emotion, and he responded with care. This wasn't just a miracle, it was a message. A message that connection isn't limited to humans. A message that the presence of the prophet carried a mercy that even nature recognized. A message that love, respect, and attachment can exist in ways we don't fully understand. And here's the deeper reflection. If a tree could feel that connection, longing, Dav, what about us? How connected are we to his teachings? How much do we value his presence in our lives through his sunnah? This story isn't just something to hear, it's something to feel. So the next time you think about the prophet remember that tree, because sometimes even the silent things around us understand value better than we do. And maybe, just maybe, it's a reminder for us to reconnect. The story of Prophet Muhammad and the splitting of the moon when the sky bore witness. Picture this, a quiet night in Makkah, the sky stretched wide, the moon shining bright above, and a group of people skeptical, doubtful, demanding proof. The Quraysh had heard the message. They had seen the character of Prophet Muhammad. Truthful, honest, consistent, but still they wanted more. Show us a sign, they said. If you are truly a messenger, then prove it. Now think about that moment. Not just pressure, but public pressure. A challenge. And right there, under the open sky, something extraordinary happened. The prophet pointed toward the moon, and by the will of Allah, the moon split. Yes, split into two distinct parts. Imagine witnessing that. The same moon you've seen your entire life, now divided, clear, visible, undeniable. People stood in shock. Some were speechless. Some were stunned. Some still refused to believe. Because here's the reality. When someone doesn't want to accept the truth, even the clearest sign can be explained away. And that's exactly what happened. Instead of accepting it, many said, "This is magic." Let that sink in. A miracle in front of their eyes, yet their hearts remained closed. But for others, this moment strengthened belief. It became a powerful confirmation that what the prophet was bringing wasn't ordinary, it was divine. The Quran later referred to this event, marking it as a sign witnessed by those present. But here's the deeper message. The splitting of the moon wasn't just about power, it was about truth. It showed that the one who controls the universe controls everything within it. The laws we think are fixed can change by his command. And it also teaches us something important. Signs are everywhere, but guidance depends on the heart. Some people saw the moon split and still doubted. Others hear about it and feel their faith grow. So the question isn't just about what you see, it's about how you see it, with doubt or with reflection. Because sometimes The greatest miracles aren't just in the sky above us. They're in the way we choose to understand them. And that night in Makkah, the sky didn't just shine. It spoke. The story of Prophet Muhammad saw and his mercy to animals. Compassion beyond words. Picture this: a world where animals are often overlooked, where their pain goes unnoticed, where their voices are never heard. Now step into a different scene. A man walking through the streets of Madinah calm, aware, deeply compassionate. This is Prophet Muhammad SAW, and his mercy. It wasn't limited to people. It extended to every living creature. One day, he noticed a camel weak, exhausted, clearly overworked. Its condition wasn't hidden. It was visible to anyone willing to look. But here's the difference: the Prophet SAW didn't just see it. He felt it. He approached the animal and gently placed his hand on it. It's said that the camel reacted almost as if it was expressing its pain, its struggle. Then the Prophet SAW addressed its owner. Fear Allah regarding this animal. He said, "You have been given it as a trust. Let that sink in." A simple interaction but a powerful message. Animals are not objects. They are a responsibility. In another moment, he saw companions about to take young birds from their nest. The mother bird hovered above, distressed, unable to understand what was happening to her babies. The Prophet SAW immediately intervened. Who has hurt this bird by taking its young? Return them to her. No delay, no hesitation, because compassion couldn't wait. And then there's another powerful teaching about a woman who was punished for imprisoning a cat, leaving it to die without food or freedom, and another about a man forgiven by Allah for giving water to a thirsty dog. Think about that contrast. Small actions, big consequences. Because in Islam, mercy isn't selective. It's universal. The Prophet SAW didn't just teach kindness, he lived it in every situation, with every creature. This story reminds us how you treat the weakest says everything about you. Kindness isn't limited to humans, it includes all of creation. And even the smallest act of care is seen by Allah. So the next time you see an animal tired, thirsty, or in need, bawsy, think, because your reaction matters. And sometimes a simple act of kindness can carry more weight than you ever imagined. That's the legacy of the Prophet SAW, a mercy not just to mankind, but to all living things. The story of Prophet Muhammad SAW and the woman who imprisoned a cat, a lesson in responsibility and mercy. Picture this: a small, helpless cat, locked away, unable to move freely, unable to find food, unable to survive on its own. No voice, no escape, no chance. Now, imagine this its entire life depending on one person, and that person choosing neglect. This is the story shared by Prophet Muhammad SAW. He told of a woman who imprisoned a cat. She kept it confined, neither feeding it, nor allowing it to roam free and find its own food. Day by day, the animal suffered. Weakness grew. Hunger deepened, until eventually, the cat died. Now pause for a moment. This isn't just about an animal, it's about responsibility. Because the Prophet SAW delivered a powerful message connected to this incident. That woman was held accountable, not for something complex, not for something grand, but for neglecting a small, defenseless creature. Let that sink in. In a world where people often overlook animals, where their suffering is ignored, this teaching hits differently. It does, Zeus. Mercy isn't optional, it's essential. Responsibility isn't just about humans, it extends to every life under your care. And here's the deeper point. The woman didn't harm the cat through action alone, but through inaction. She didn't feed it. She didn't release it. She did nothing. And sometimes doing nothing is the greatest harm. This story isn't just meant to be heard, it's meant to wake something inside us. Because how often do we ignore small responsibilities? How often do we overlook those who depend on us? The prophet Saw used this example to teach that even the smallest, even against an animal, matters. On the flip side, he also taught that kindness, even giving water to a thirsty animal, can lead to forgiveness. So the scale is clear. Small actions, big consequences. So the next time you see an animal or anything placed under your care, remember this story, because your choices, whether action or inaction, carry weight. And true compassion, it's not just in what you say, it's in what you do, especially when no one else is watching. The story of Prophet Muhammad Saw and the man who tried to kill him, a moment where mercy overcame rage. Picture this: the desert is quiet, air is still, and a man approaches with a sword in his hand. Not for protection, not for defense, but with one clear intention: to kill. Prophet Muhammad Saw was resting away from the crowd under the shade of a tree. It was a rare moment of calm, but suddenly that calm was shattered. The man stood over him, weapon raised. "Who will save you from me now?" he demanded. It was a moment that could make anyone panic, but not the Prophet Saw. Without fear, without hesitation, he answered with just one word: Allah. That's it. No long speech, struggle, just complete your trust. And then something incredible happened. The man's hand began to shake, his grip weakened, the sword slipped and fell. Ian slipped. Now, the Prophet Saw picked up the sword. The same weapon that was meant to harm him was now in his control, and he asked the man the same question: "Who will save you from me?" Imagine that moment. The fear, the realization, the helplessness. The man, shaken and overwhelmed, replied, "No one." And right there at the peak of power, with every reason to take revenge, Prophet Muhammad Saw did something extraordinary. He forgave him. Punishment. No retaliation. Mercy. He let the man go. Think about that. This wasn't weakness. This was strength at its highest level, the power to act, but choosing compassion instead. And that moment, it didn't just save a life, it changed a heart. The man who came with hatred left with respect. Some narrations even mention that he later embraced Islam, moved by what he had witnessed. This story teaches something deep. Real strength isn't in revenge, it's in restraint. Real power isn't in control, it's in character. And real victory isn't when your enemy falls, it's when hearts change. So the next time you're wronged, when anger rises, when you have the chance to strike back, remember this moment, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is forgive. And in that forgiveness, you don't just change others, you elevate yourself. The story of Prophet Muhammad Saw and the thirsty dog, when a small act earned great mercy. Picture this: a scorching day, the desert heat rising, every step heavy under the blazing sun. A man walks along, exhausted, thirsty, searching for relief. Finally, he finds a well. He climbs down, drinks deeply, feels life return to his body. That moment of relief, pure satisfaction. But as he climbs back up, something catches his attention. A dog, panting heavily. Gauchi, circling the well. Disperaci, thirsty just like he was moments ago. Now, Bausi, this is the moment where everything changes. The man could have walked away. After all, it's just an animal, right? But something inside him responded. Empathy. He thought, this dog is suffering the same thirst I just felt. And without hesitation, he went back down into the well. No bucket, no container. So what did he do? He filled his shoe with water, climbed back up carefully, and brought it to the dog. Step by step, drop by drop, until the dog drank, and its thirst was quenched. A simple act. No audience, was no recognition. But according to the teaching of Prophet Muhammad SAW, that moment reached far beyond the desert. Allah appreciated that Akshanan forgave the man for his sins. Let that sink in. Not a grand gesture, not something extraordinary in the eyes of the world, just kindness to a thirsty animal, and it changed everything. This story flips the way we think about impact. Tell Zeus, no act of kindness is ever too small. Compassion counts even when no one is watching, and mercy shown to creation brings mercy from the Creator. The Prophet SAW used this story to teach something powerful. If kindness to a dog can lead to forgiveness, then imagine the impact of consistent compassion in our lives. So, the next time you see someone or something in need, when you have the chance to help, even in a small way, take it, because you never know that one simple act might be the one that changes everything. The story of Prophet Muhammad SAW and the spider's web. Miracle when the smallest shield became the strongest protection. Picture this, a desert under the cover of night, silence stretching for miles, and danger closing in. Prophet Muhammad SAW and Abu Bakr were on a journey that would change history, the Hijra. But it was just travel. This was escape, a carefully planned mission to survive against all odds. The Quraysh were hunting them relentlessly. Step by step, they tracked their path until they reached a place no one expected. The Cave of Thor. Inside the cave, the atmosphere was intense. You could almost hear the heartbeat of the moment. Outside, they were closer than ever, close enough that one glance inside, and it would all be over. Abu Bakr felt it. That pressure. That, not for himself but for the Prophet SAW. He whispered, his voice heavy with concern, if they just look down, they'll see us. And then came a response that defines faith itself. Dunar, indeed, Allah is with us. No panic, no hesitation, just complete trust. And then something extraordinary unfolded. At the entrance of the cave, a spider spun its web, thin, fragile, almost invisible. Nearby, a bird built its nest. To any human eye, it looked simple, insignificant. But to those searching, it meant one thing. No one had entered this cave, because who could pass through a fresh spider's web without breaking it? The pursuers stopped. They looked. They thought. And then, they turned away. Just like that, the hunt ended. Think about it. Not a wow. Not army. Not a weapon. A spider's web. What we see as weak, Allah can turn into strength. What we think is small can become powerful beyond imagination. Inside that cave, it wasn't just a miracle of protection, it was a lesson. A lesson that faith isn't about what you see. It's about what you believe. A lesson that when you trust Allah completely, even the most delicate thread can become your shield. A lesson that divine help doesn't always come in grand, obvious ways. It comes exactly how it's needed. So the next time you feel vulnerable, when things seem too fragile, too uncertain, remember that web. Because sometimes the smallest things carry the greatest power. Prophet Muhammad and migration of Medina. Imagine living in a place you love, your home, your city, your people, yet being forced out simply because of what you believe. That was the reality for Prophet Muhammad SAW and his followers in Makkah. The message of Islam was growing, but so was the resistance. The leaders of Quraysh weren't just disagreeing, they were plotting. Pressure turned into persecution, and persecution turned into danger. Then came a turning point. Allah gave permission for migration Hijra journey not just across land, but towards safety, freedom, and a new beginning. But this wasn't an ordinary trip. The Quraysh had a plan: surround the Prophet's house and end his mission once and for all. It was serious, life or death serious, yet in a moment filled with courage and trust. Prophet Muhammad SAW walked out of his home right past those waiting to harm him, protected by Allah. Instead of heading straight to Medina, He and his closest companion, Abu Bakr Ra, took a different route. They hid in the cave of Thor for 3 days. 3 days of tension, 3 days of uncertainty. At one point, the pursuers came so close that Abu Bakr Ra whispered, "If they look down, they will see us." And the Prophet replied with calm confidence, "Do not worry, Allah is with us." That's not just faith, that's unshakable. Then, the journey continued, across the desert, under the burning sun, through risk and uncertainty, and finally Medina. But this wasn't just an arrival, it was a celebration. The people of Medina welcomed him with open arms, joy and love. For the first time, Muslims had a place where they could live freely, practice their faith, and build a community based on justice, brotherhood, and peace. The Hijra wasn't just about leaving Makkah. It was about choosing faith over comfort. It was about sacrifice for a greater purpose. It was about trusting Allah even when the path ahead isn't clear. And here's something powerful. The Islamic calendar doesn't start with a birth or a victory. It starts with this journey, because sometimes the most important step in your story is the one where you decide to move forward no matter how hard it is. That's the legacy of Hijra, a journey of courage, a journey of faith, a journey that changed history forever. Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr Ra in the cave, a moment of unshakable faith. Picture this, a silent desert night, tension in the air, and a manhunt underway. The leaders of Quraysh had made their move. Prophet Muhammad was their target and they weren't holding back. But what they didn't realize, this wasn't just a journey of escape. It was a moment that would define faith, trust, and unshakable belief. Right by his side was his closest friend Abu Bakr Ra. Together, they didn't take the obvious path. Instead of heading straight toward Medina, they moved in the opposite direction and took refuge in a small, hidden place known as the Cave of Thor. Now, imagine the scene inside that cave. It's dark, quiet, every sound echoes. Side, enemies are searching, getting closer. Step by step, Abu Bakr Ra felt the weight of the moment. Not fear for himself but concern for the Prophet saw. At one point, as the footsteps of the pursuers approached the very entrance of the cave, whispered, "If they just look down, they'll see us." That's how close it was. And in that intense, heart-pounding moment, Prophet Muhammad responded with words that still echo through history. "Do not be afraid. Indeed, Allah is with us." Let that sink in. No panic, no doubt, just complete trust. And then something incredible happened. The entrance of the cave appeared untouched. A spider had spun a delicate web across it. A bird had nested nearby. To anyone looking, it seemed like no one had entered that cave for a long time. The pursuers stopped, looked, and walked away. Just like that, what seemed fragile a spider's web became a powerful shield. A reminder that protection doesn't always come in the way we expect. Inside the cave, it wasn't just about hiding. It was about trust so strong that even in the face of danger, your heart remains steady. This wasn't just a story of survival. It was a story of companionship, of standing by someone when it matters most. A story of courage not loud, but calm and firm. A story of faith that when you truly rely on Allah, even the impossible becomes possible. So the next time life feels overwhelming, when you feel cornered, when the odds seem stacked against you, remember that cave, because sometimes all it takes is faith the size of a whisper and trust as strong as a mountain. The story of Prophet Muhammad and the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Victor de Luglaikwan. Picture this, a group of peaceful travelers dressed in simple garments, moving toward Makkah not for war, not for conquest, but for worship. At the front of this journey was Prophet Muhammad leading around 1,400 companions with a single intention to perform Umrah. No weapons of war, no battle plan, just faith, But as they approached Makkah, the Quraysh blocked their path. Tension rose. Instantly, they weren't there but they weren't weak either. They were ready, if pushed. Still, the Prophet chose something unexpected. Negotiation. What followed was the Treaty of Hudaybiyah deal. That, at first glance, didn't seem fair at all. Let's be real, it looked tough. The Muslims had to return to Medina without performing Umrah that year. They would come back the next year. Instead, any person from Makkah who joined the Muslims without permission would be sent back. But if someone left the Muslims for Makkah, they wouldn't be returned. Even some companions were struggling to accept it. Isn't this unfair? They wondered. But the Prophet saw what others couldn't. He saw beyond the moment. With calm confidence, he agreed to the terms. Why? Because sometimes winning isn't about immediate results, it's about long-term impact. And that's exactly what happened. This treaty created peace, a pause in conflict, and in that peaceful environment, something incredible took place. Islam spread faster than ever before. People weren't seeing Muslims through the lens of war anymore. They were seeing their character, their message, their truth. Within just a couple of years, the number of Muslims multiplied dramatically. What looked like a setback turned into a strategic victory. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah teaches something powerful. Not every win looks like a win in the moment. Patience can be stronger than force, and sometimes the best mavi is the one that requires the most restraint. The Prophet didn't just lead with strength, he led with wisdom. So the next time you face a situation where things don't go your way, where compromise feels difficult, where patience feels heavy, remember Hudaybiyah, because sometimes what feels like a loss today is actually setting you up for a much greater victory tomorrow. The story of Prophet Muhammad and the conquest of Makkah, the day mercy won over power. Picture this, 10,000 strong, a powerful army moving toward Makkah. No fear, no chaos, just calm, controlled strength. Years earlier, Prophet Muhammad had been forced to leave this very city, his home, driven out, rejected, and opposed. But now he was returning, not as an exile, but as a leader. And this was history in the making. The Quraysh, once confident and defiant, now stood uncertain. They knew they couldn't match this. They expected revenge. After all, that's what usually happens in moments like this, right? Victory equals payback. But this story, it was different. As the Muslims entered Makkah, something remarkable happened. There was no widespread fighting, no destruction, no chaos in the streets. Instead, there was discipline, control. And at the center of it all stood the Prophet his head lowered in humility, not pride, not arrogance, humility. Let that sink in. A man who had every reason to take revenge chose something greater, forgiveness. He gathered the people of Makkah, the very ones who had opposed him, insulted him, even tried to harm him, and asked a powerful question. What do you think I will do with you? They replied, hoping for mercy, you are a noble brother, son of a noble brother. And then came words that changed everything. No blame upon you today. You are all free. Just like that. Orange. Punishment. Mercy. This wasn't weakness, it was strength at its highest level. The Kaaba, once filled with idols, was cleansed. The message of truth was restored. But the real victory? It wasn't just physical, it was moral. The conquest of Makkah showed the world that true leadership isn't about domination, it's about compassion. It's about knowing when you have the power to act and choosing mercy instead. And here's the lesson. Anyone can be powerful when they're winning, but it takes true greatness to forgive when you have the upper hand. So the next time you're in a position of strength, when you could take revenge, when you could hold on to anger, remember Makkah. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let go and choose mercy. The story of Prophet Muhammad and the Battle of Badr, when faith defeated the odds. Picture this, a small group, just over 300 people standing in the open desert. Across from them, nearly 1,000 armed warriors, stronger, better equipped, fully prepared for battle. On paper, this wasn't even close. But history isn't written on paper, it's written in moments of courage, faith, and unshakable belief. This was the Battle of Badr. The Muslims weren't planning a full-scale war. They were few in number, limited in resources, and facing an enemy that looked impossible to defeat. Yet, here they were standing firm. At the center stood Prophet Muhammad SAW, calm, focused, steady. But here's what makes this moment powerful before the battle even began. He turned not to strategy alone. To Allah, he raised his hands in deep, heartfelt dua. "O Allah, if this small group is defeated today, you will not be worshipped on this earth." This wasn't just a prayer, it was desperation mixed with complete trust. And then, the battle began. The shook. Swords clashed. The air filled with intensity. But something unseen was happening. Divine help. The Quran tells us that angels were sent to support the believers. Strength came from places they couldn't see. Courage filled hearts that could have easily been afraid. And slowly, the tide began to turn. What seemed impossible became reality. Against all odds, the Muslims won. Let that sink in. 300. Defeating all. Not because of numbers, not because of weapons, but because of faith. The Battle of Badr wasn't just a military victory. It was a moment that proved a powerful truth. When you stand for something real, when your intention is pure, when your trust in Allah is complete, even the impossible becomes possible. It also showed the leadership of the Prophet SAW. He didn't just lead from the front, he connected hearts to purpose, to belief, to something bigger than fear. And here's the takeaway. Life will put you in situations where the odds are stacked against you, where you feel outnumbered, outmatched, overwhelmed. But Badr reminds us, it's not always about how much you have. It's about how strong your faith is. 'Cause sometimes victory doesn't come from you can see. It comes from belief you can't. The story of Prophet Muhammad SAW and the Battle of Uhud, a lesson in discipline, loss, and resilience. Picture this. The battlefield is set, the mountain of Uhud standing tall, and a sense of determination in the air. Just 1 year after the victory at Badr, the Muslims were facing the Quraysh again this time at Uhud. The energy was different. Confidence was higher. After all, they had already seen what faith could do. But this battle, it would teach a completely different lesson. Before the fighting began, Prophet Muhammad SAW made a strategic move. He placed a group of archers on a small hill and gave them one clear, powerful instruction. Do not leave your position no matter what happens. Simple, direct, critical. At first, everything went in favor of the Muslims. The Quraysh lines began to break. It looked like another clear victory. But then, something changed. Some of the archers looked at the battlefield and thought, the battle is over. We're winning. And despite the Prophet's clear command, many of them left their posts to collect spoils. That single decision, it changed everything. The opposing forces saw the opening. They attacked from behind. Suddenly, the advantage was gone. Confusion spread. The battlefield shifted. What looked like victory turned into a moment of crisis. In the chaos, Prophet Muhammad SAW himself was injured. Rumors even spread that he had been killed. Imagine the shock, the fear, the emotional weight of that moment. And yet he stood firm. In the middle of confusion and pain, he regrouped stabilizing the situation with patience and strength. The Battle of Uhud didn't end in a clear victory like Badr. It came with loss, with pain, with lessons that couldn't be ignored. And that's exactly the point. Uhud teaches us that success isn't just about faith, it's also about discipline, about following instructions, even when things seem to be going your way. It reminds us that one small mistake, one moment of disobedience, can have big consequences. But it also shows something powerful. Even when you fall, even when things don't go as planned, you can rise again. The prophet didn't let this moment define defeat. He turned it into a lesson, a moment of growth. So the next time things go wrong, when a win turns into a setback, when you face the consequences of a mistake, remember Uji, because sometimes the greatest victories come from the lessons we learn in our hardest moments. The story of Prophet Muhammad and the Battle of Kondak, when strategy changed the game. Picture this: a massive alliance of enemy's tribes united, thousands strong, marching toward Medina with one goal. This wasn't just another battle. This was survival. They were outnumbered again. But this time is bigger, more organized, and more dangerous than ever before. A direct fight in the open? That would have been risky. So what did Prophet Muhammad do? He chose something unexpected. Strategy over strength. On the advice of Salman al-Farsi, an idea was introduced, something unfamiliar to Arabia. Dig a trench. A deep, wide trench around the exposed sides of Medina. Simple idea. Powerful impact. They got to work, side by side. No titles, no status, just unity. Even the Prophet himself joined in. Digging, carrying dirt, sharing of the moment. Think about that. A leader who doesn't just give orders but works with his people. Days passed. The trench was ready, and then the enemy arrived. Thousands of warriors, ready for battle, only to be stopped in their tracks by something they didn't expect. A trench. They couldn't cross it easily. Their advantage neutralized. Frustration grew. They held their ground, but the pressure was real. Cold nights, hunger, fear. The tension inside Medina was intense. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, mental, spiritual. Yet, the Prophet remained steady, calm under pressure, anchored in faith. And then when things seemed stretched to the limit, help came. Not in the form of an army, but in the form of nature itself. A powerful windstorm hit. Tents were uprooted. Fires went out. Chaos spread through the enemy camp. There, broke. Their morale collapsed. And just like that, they retreated. No full battle. No massive clash. Just patience, strategy, and trust in Allah. The Battle of Kondak teaches something powerful. Sometimes, winning isn't about fighting harder, it's about thinking smarter. Sometimes, defense is stronger than attack. And sometimes, the greatest victories come from holding your ground. It also shows that leadership isn't just about power, it's about wisdom, teamwork, and staying calm when everything feels uncertain. So the next time you're facing a situation that feels overwhelming, when pressure builds, when the odds seem impossible, remember Kondak, because with the right strategy, strong unity, and trust in Allah, even the biggest storms can turn in your favor.